Hello, today is Monday, May 13th, and welcome to episode 335 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the foreign policy and national security debates shaking up America. I'm NSI's founder and executive director, Jamil Jaffer. I'm joined today by NSI's deputy executive director, Jessica Jones, and NSI's senior fellow, Morgan Vina. So today we're talking about Europe and China. That's right. You might say to yourself, well, why do you talk about Europe and China? There's no The Europeans, just like the United States, are starting to sort of push themselves away from China, but it's not completely true. As it turns out, in Hungary, Vicktor Orban has built a close relationship with President Xi from China. In fact, he was just there last week visiting, and we saw a lot of this new relationship. We know that the Chinese electric car manufacturer BYD is already building a factory, a EV factory in Hungary. At this meeting, they signed a number of cooperation agreements, including an agreement to have another Chinese factory built by Great Wall Motor in Hungary. And of course, Cattle, the major Chinese battery manufacturer, has invested more than $7 billion in a 100 gigawatt factory in Hungary as well. Overall, Chinese firms have invested over $16 billion in Hungary, making China the country's number one investor. So obviously a huge interest there for China and Hungary. At the same time, Viktor Orban starting to come closer to China, saying, look, their peace plan for Ukraine sounds like not a bad idea. It might actually work. President Xi praises this new view within the European Union because, of course, Hungary is a NATO member, having joined in the first group of Warsaw Pact nations in 1999, as well as an EU member for over 2 decades. Interesting situation here with Hungary breaking away from the rest of the EU. They've also, by the way, told NATO they don't intend to participate in NATO's long-term plan for Ukraine, calling it a, quote, crazy idea. So, Morgan, what are we to make of all this new relationship between Hungary and China?
Yeah, no, I think bottom line here, Viktor Orban is playing spoiler within NATO. I don't think it's much of a surprise here that China is targeting Hungary. They clearly have had a strong trade partnership for a while. Viktor Orban is now calling China an quote unquote all weather partner. So I think what we're seeing here is a very strategic move by Xi Jinping coming into Europe and really capitalizing on those partners within Europe that are sympathetic and really trying to sort of pick them off and expose those frictions within the NATO alliance, within the EU. We've seen Viktor Orban play spoiler in NATO before, particularly with the accession of Finland and Sweden.
Right.
We've seen him.
They held it up for quite a
Right.
while.
Right, exactly, and we've seen these sympathies towards Vladimir Putin. So I don't think it's much of a surprise that Xi has really sort of seen Hungary as an opportunity to really expose those frictions, as I said before.
So, just what about that? I mean, obviously we've got a situation where President Xi just visited Emmanuel Macron in France. That conversation did not go well, particularly on Ukraine. Then he goes to Hungary and he's sort of feted, as Morgan pointed out, an all-weather friend for Hungary.
Mhm.
Almost like sounds a lot like the Russia No Limits partnership. Should we be worried about this? I mean, is this a potential? Is there a potential for the NATO alliance to break up over the relationship with country like China?
I think it's interesting, speaking to the all-weather relationship, that China really picks the worst friends, right? They sign up for this no limits partnership with Russia, and Russia invades Ukraine. Their other friend, to put the near quotes, is Iran, where they have Houthis flying, firing missiles, and they're trying to flag the Chinese vessels so they don't actually come under attack. And now they're picking Hungary. I think they see this likely permanent shift here in Washington, that when it comes to tensions with Beijing, they don't see that changing. So they're looking to Europe, right, as a potential area. They see mixed messaging. We've talked here a lot about the foreign policy unity when it comes to the European continent. And I think they think there's wiggle room to find some friends there. But they pick Hungary out of all friends, right? The last holdout when it comes to, multi-year aid to Ukraine, or vote earlier this year, right? The EU has been at loggerheads with Viktor Orban for years now when it comes to kind of diminishing media freedom, attacks on minorities in Hungary. And so they picked the most unpopular friends. So if they want a PR boost within Europe, this isn't going to get them that, right? And while Hungary was one of the, I think it was the first country to sign up for Belt and Road when it comes to investment, one of their kind of showcase infrastructure projects is this railroad between Belgrade and Budapest would take Hungary 100 years to pay back. I think they finished like 60 miles of it, like nowhere near complete. So not only do they pick Hungary, this outlier, they also, none of their projects seem to be what they're doing around the world, which isn't getting very far.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is a standard move for China, Morgan, but is it concerning that they're right inside the tent? And what does this say? I mean, President Trump, former President Trump, and maybe future President Trump has a very close relationship with Viktor Orban. Orban was just in Mar-a-Lago. They're friends. The former president supported his election. Should we be worried that maybe NATO is in for trouble in a new Trump presidency with Orban and Hungary? The former president having expressed a lot of concern about NATO, not just their spending and their failure to spend up to their limits, but just a larger question about the NATO alliance writ large and some sympathy towards Russia. Do we worry that this could be the end of NATO if Donald Trump is elected in the United States and Viktor Orban continues to play footsie with China and Hungary?
So I think there are two things here, Jamil. The first is the sustainability of the NATO alliance, and I am confident that the NATO alliance is stronger than any problematic leader within the alliance, right? We saw NATO, I think, have a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, under the Trump administration, particularly to the extent that you have a lot of NATO members that, just frankly, are not contributing enough of their, GDP to defense. That is
Right.
a problem that has been a problem for a long time now, right? It was a problem under the Obama administration. It was a problem under Trump administration. And I think what we're seeing more recently, though, is Europe really start to sort of turn a corner when it comes to Ukraine. They see Russia, knocking on their door, and I think they're really having to have this realization that NATO is an existential, or excuse me, Russia is an existential threat to their sovereign territory. I mean, we saw Sweden and Finland, particularly, very quickly rush to the alliance and want to join, right? At the same time, though, I think this does bode poorly for Ukraine, with Trump coming in, potentially winning in the presidential election in November. When you have spoilers in the alliance like Viktor Orban, I think that there is a tendency here to really not want to continue supporting a multi-year war in Ukraine. So I am concerned for the short term for Ukraine. Should Trump win the next election? But overall, I think the NATO alliance is stronger than any one leader.
And just what about this question of whether China's sort of playing it smart here and actually trying to help their friends in Russia by undermining support within Europe for the Ukraine effort, in part by sort of paying off the skeptical nations like Hungary? Is this a larger effort by China to make closer, to build that relationship, that no limits partnership with Russia, and ultimately undermine support for the war in Ukraine, which they've tried to end a number of times with these sort of peace plans that essentially adopt the Russia position?
I mean, maybe, but I also think they're just seeking opportunity where they can. And if it's basically these, all-weather relationships, I mean, the definition is basically you're undermining the US-led world order, right? If you're a country signed up for that, we want you as an all-weather partner, right? That's the definition. So while it may aid their support to Russia in its fight against Ukraine, I think it really is case by case. Here's an opportunity. Let's continue to fracture this unity. Let's continue to just pick off partners, bring them to our side that can undermine the US world-led order.
Well, there you have it, folks. A real challenge of the U.S.-led world order between Viktor Orban and China. That's a wrap. So thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again Wednesday, May 15th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast, 3 times a week on the foreign policy and national security debates shaking up America. We're also on YouTube, as you all may have heard us say many times. So if you want to see us and Morgan's young daughter, you'll have a chance to check that out. Check out our channel on the NSI's channel on YouTube. And if you like what you heard or saw on YouTube, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.